You know, I see a lot of Civivi videos. Civivi releases a lot of knives. A lot of the knives get sent to a lot of the knife reviewers. And so basically you get a lot of tabletop for your Civivi knife videos. What I'm planning to do today is something a little bit different. I'm going to do a very comprehensive review on this Civivi Vision FG. I'm going to test the steel. I'm going to test the rust resistance. I'm going to check out the lock. I'm going to disassemble it. I'm going to give you a good old what for once over, and I'm going to do it until this knife fails. How am I so certain I'm going to do that? Because I'm filming this part at the end, and it already has. So the Civivi Vision FG is going for the fidget-friendly EDC pocket knife market. Its overall length is 7.95 inches, that's about 200 millimeters. Its blade length is 89 millimeters, that's 3.5 inches. When you close this thing, it's 4.45 inches, 113 millimeters. It weighs 4.35 ounces, that's 123 grams. The blade is 3 millimeters thick, which is 0.12 inches. And the steel is Nitro V flat ground to a finish of 59 to 61 Rockwell hardness, satin finished, and they are calling it a reverse Tanto style blade. These handles are made of G10 in the natural or jade finish. It's got a reversible pocket clip and it has a full stainless steel liner.
Where's Hilda? Hello. Who's a good girl? And there's old mate Alan. Hey, buddy. Oh, shall we go do some pats? Shall we go do some pats? Oh, shall we start again? Hello, Mr. Alan. Yes. Hello, Hilda.
For general use knife tasks, this thing is great. It's got a nice thin blade that cuts through everything very, very well. It's thin behind the edge, which is makes it nice for slicing through meats as well as cardboard, things like that. The thicker blades generally go slower through cuts and bind up and rely a lot more on just the absolute apex being very, very sharp. When you've got a nice thin edge, it doesn't really matter as much how absolutely sharp your knife is. It'll still cut as just a generally sharp object. So yeah, and I really like how the blade is sort of offset, so the handle is higher, giving sort of negative space underneath the blade, so you can get your knuckles under there and do cutting against boards and things like that. It feels a little bit more at home in the kitchen than a lot of other knife blades do. The lock initially was a little bit of a sore point for me. I ended up adjusting my grip around it and it ends up handling just fine, but it is a slight learning curve on how to hold the thing without the lock sort of feeling a bit out of place. It's definitely higher up and it's definitely something that is sitting in the usual path of the hand when it holds basically any other knife. But I dare say if you're a knife person, you've probably had an AD 20 or a 20.5, so if you've got used to those knives, you'll get used to this one. No worries at all. It's a bit like how on some of the Bark River fixed blades, there's that hump. You either get used to it or you just shop around the Bark River hump. There's plenty of Civivi knives that don't have this lock. But the lock does have the benefit of being very, very strong, which I'll show you later on, as well as being interesting and fun to play with, which, you know what, for EDC is definitely a thing worth considering. One of the first things I did when I got the knife out of the box before I cut much with it was an edge test. I do a rope cutting test periodically testing against a sheet of paper. Once the knife no longer glides through the sheet of paper, I stop the test. It kind of tests the absolute apex sharpness and also a little bit of the toughness of the knife, obviously going through the rope, impacting the board. It's pretty standardized. I've done it over a lot of different knives by this point, so pretty happy with it as a test. This knife on its factory edge did 150 rope cuts before it was no longer crazy sharp. I would estimate this being at about 20 degrees per side as the factory edge angle. I sharpen my knives down to 17 because it's just my preferred edge for performance, especially for EDC knives. I think test of a good steel is if it can hold a 17 degree per side edge through various tasks without sort of rolling out or chipping out or anything like that. And most steels can, like, it's not a hard thing, like your 8CRs, AUS 8s, they all can. It's just the test of a basically competent EDC steel, in my opinion. Alrighty, and now the edge test that I sort of compare, I suppose. So 17 per side on the Work Sharp Professional Adjust, color and the edge angle. So this is how I usually get a rough idea of how the factory edge might have been. So the fact that I've removed steel without touching the apex at 17 degrees shows that this edge angle was numerically higher. So I would guess about 20 degrees, maybe 19 or something. All, nothing crazy precise, but it's just how I get a rough feel of it. So yeah, it moved up through the sharpening grits using the Work Sharp system. I'm preferring freehand sharpening lately, but this is a great system for getting an exact edge, like a pretty much exact edge. It removes 2 of the 3 dimensions of space that you can make mistakes in, so pretty good beginner system, especially nice big stones that are made of pretty high quality abrasives. So I have been enjoying the system, but definitely been enjoying freehanding a little bit more. That being said, the edges this thing makes are very, very sharp, and I have yet to really match them freehanding, but maybe one day. So the edge test began, and it immediately did way better at 17 degrees, and of course with the polished edge that I put on it. Obviously these things are going to add a fair degree of performance, and one thing that I think if you take away from these tests, whether you agree with the numbers and compare them or whatever, it just shows that sharpening has such a massive impact on edge retention and how you sharpen a knife, the edge angles, all that sort of stuff. It's all so variable, but this test result was way higher than the 150 that the factory edge did. It cut all the way through until 325 times. I did stop at about 250 because I felt it was starting to get a bit jagged, like a little bit less nice, but it didn't hiccup on the paper, and the hiccup on the paper is when I usually stop the test. So 325 times, which is definitely comparable with what this steel and other steels like it have done in the past. It's not going to catch your S30Vs, but for pretty basic grade ingot stuff, this is one of the better ones for sure. So for rust testing, I made some saltwater solution, like 3 grams per 100 mils of water, and I put it in a sprayer that can do like a mist type effect. I wanted to do like a sea spray sort of periodic spray, so these co-sprays are really good for that. They've got a really fine droplet ratio. So I laid them all out on a ladder outside and just misted them probably 5 or 6 times throughout a complete day, so from about 8 a.m. to about 7 p.m. I did set up a GoPro with a time lapse, but the saltwater spray kind of ended up making it look like dog shit. So here's that, just so you can see it. I also ended up adding a 1095 and a D2 knife about halfway through the test as well, because I really wanted to show something rusting, because none of them really looked at about the 4-hour mark like they were doing anything at all. So I wanted knives that would definitely show up some rust.
We're going to get those off when I get back from Pilates. Alrighty, let's have a look and see how we've gone. Let's collect them all up. So obviously that is pretty bad, and the remover was on there for the shortest amount of time. It's just a carbon steel. And the tool steel of the D2, obvious rust coming to the surface there, basically resting where all the dots were settled. The AUS 10, not so bad. There is some rust around this part here. Not too bad really. LC14C28N, probably the third worst out of all of them on that finish. Pretty, fair bit of rust comes to the surface. Spy 27, very rust resistant, did very well, as did the Nitro V, which is the subject of this video, I suppose. Yeah, pretty good. Pretty much the same as the Spy 27, very rust resistant. And then H2, just salt residue on there, no rust at all. I'll wash them all off with Isocol or Windex, something like that, and get them nice and clean, and we'll see if there's any actual damage done. So pretty cheerfully, I would say that they've all turned out, it's just a bit of alcohol there, they've all turned out pretty fine. No real long-term effects. So this has got some little dots in there that are going to be, I'll have to just blast them out with something, but I think it'll clean back to absolutely fine, even the AUS 10. And that's got like more of a tumbled finish, more prone to rusting. I mean, hell, even the D2 here, really fine. It's just the carbon steel. Yeah, it's got proper tarnishing on it, which isn't the end of the world. Most carbon steel knives end up looking like that anyway. So overall, I think the Nitro V is a pretty good rust-resistant steel. You'd have to put it through some pretty severe abuse to get it to rust. You'd have to really forget about it, soggy tackle box or something like that, to really notice too much tarnishing. That was basically a 12-hour day, getting consistently spritzed with like sea foam pretty much. So, pretty decent showing. For really most of these steels, you really do have to like forget about a knife to have like a big amount of rust get drawn from it. So there it is.
So I wanted to see how the Super Lock worked exactly. I figured it was in use fairly similar to the Shark Lock, but I was certain that mechanically it was going to be different enough to obviously be called a different thing. So I opened up my AD10 first, and this is just a terrifying knife to disassemble because it's got a spring that sits right there and blasts out at you. And as I found pretty soon, the Snex Super Lock is the same. As soon as I got that cover open, out popped the spring and disaster. I had to find it, I had to dig around on the ground, and then in it came, and it went back in fairly easily, but still, it's a tiny little spring, and I did this outside, so complete psycho, I know. So just be very, very careful. If you feel the need to poke around inside this knife, better yet, just don't, and just look, you've got a video of me doing it. I've done it, so you don't have to. As a lot of things that happen in this video can be thought of.
Very, very ginger. But basically, this little arm pulls back just a little way. The blade tang, you can see there's a cutout on the other side. It's going to go around there and snap into it. So you've got a fair bit that needs to go wrong to get that out. My God, this spring it jumped out before. Almost ruined my day. My week, even. But I found it. So that is it. Oh, a very dangerous game, leaving it untouched. So yeah, that is how it goes. And I'll show you the Demco quickly, which is an even more fucking terrifying knife to open up. I reckon the last time I opened up the Demco, I shot the spring across the room and it took ages for me to find it. Oh, always a relief when it goes back together. So yeah, just looking at the Demco. I'll open it from this side. Alrighty, brace yourself. I've already got it mostly undone, just the... So under this is a spring that is just waiting to launch out at you. Oh, there it is. Oh, even had a little bit of an arch going in it already. So the Demco, much more contact between this lock instrument here. So you've got about almost a centimetre worth of steel that needs to be moved aside for the blade to, I guess, fail or for you to unlock it. So needs a little bit more motion, I guess, but probably exchanging for a slightly more robust lock. Not that these both aren't very, very strong locks, because they absolutely would be. Now, this is terrifying, having this open like this, so on you go, Mr. Scale. Yeah, much less of a push required to get this one going, whereas this one needs, you know, a little bit more of a slide back. This one feels a little bit more like mechanically like slocky or locky and flocky and, you know, whereas this feels a little bit more like you're just pushing a button. Both are great though, really good ideas for locks. Yeah, put like maybe if you're going to open these guys up, maybe put like a little tent over you so you can see where that spring goes when it comes firing out at you, because it will.
Now, I can't stress enough, this isn't the proper way to use this knife, but I wanted to test how strong the super lock was, and I thought battening is usually something that'll jolt free even a pretty robust back lock and a liner lock, and it can damage liner locks, and, you know, just to test the lock durability and how, you know, resilient the lock is to actually staying open. I did some battening through some of my, you know, pretty decently hard mallee wood. So yeah, it's a really, really strong lock. There wasn't even a slightest hint of weakness or of folding, and it didn't add any play to the blade at all. A really strong lock, and if you're after a strong lock that's very fun to play with, then yeah, this is the knife lock for you. I've got no doubt. It's a really good one, both fun and strong. Isn't that like the holy duopoly of knife locks? And I mean, did some pretty ridiculous stuff, like this is dumb. I was expecting the knife to like flip closed on me, but no, it definitely didn't. So really, really happy with how strong the super lock is. But the rest of the dumb stuff that I just did caught up with me right about now. As you can see, I have turned that blade edge into basically a ribbon.
So, while I can attest to the strength of the super lock from a batoning challenge, I must confirm that which we all probably knew already, that thinly ground pocket knives are not very good for splitting wood. Oh, that's a shame. I was actually starting to like the knife. Could have been one of my EDCs, but instead, to the review graveyard you go. Womp womp. Now, this is completely my fault. I was, you know, got a bit eager there on that last piece, I think. Forgot how hard my wood sometimes is. And yes, obviously a knife that is, and it's not even the very edge, it's just the meat behind the very edge. It's just too thin to put up with stupid work like that. So there you go, my Vision FG. I mean, I don't think I'm going to be able to straighten it out. I've had it in the vise a few times. It's dead, Jim, but I think I can still offer some final thoughts after, you know, a few days of carry and some tests.
Yeah, so sadly the stupid part was at the end of the video, so don't take that for any kind of final impression. This is a great little EDC knife. I really like the thin, slicey blade. I like how it's unique in terms of its lock, and even in terms of its look and design, really. Really just a cool Civivi knife. Pretty well made. I think the steel is fine. I think that end result is nothing to do with the steel, it's just to do with a dumb, excessive use kind of case. And as normal steel, if you sharpen it well, it's going to perform, you know, pretty good for you. As long as you don't expect, you know, S45 VN or, you know, K390 levels of performance from it, it's going to do just fine. I found the super lock needed a little bit of adjustment to get your hand around before you started sort of just working with the knife. Otherwise, it felt like it was kind of poking me for the first little while. That's the way I've ruined the blade. You can see it's a really thin blade, and that's what you want. You want a thin blade that will fail when you baton with it. That's what you want in an EDC knife, so don't have any issues with that at all either. Look, overall, I would be happy to say this is worth the $150. It does feel like a slightly more premium product, and yeah, overall, it's the extra little design chop that I think puts it over the line to make it worth your money. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Civivi Vision FG.